Welcome, Dominic, to our 15th podcast now. We had a little bit of a break, Dominic, but now we're really getting back into action. And I want to kick off this podcast with one very simple question, which is also a bit of our classic question, so to say. Like, what's your digital health journey? I was like quite happy. I was interacting before with buyer G4A, but the first time I saw you was at MedTech World. So, like, tell me your story. Like, tell me what you've been through. Like, how what you've been up to. I really would like to learn more there.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. The question, and I actually just left a phone call, and my background in digital and my journey goes way back. So the phone call, we were joking about the old America Online days and the .com kind of boom. And that's, I think, in my opinion, that's where my journey really started. And so the joke that we had was about the term 𝐸-𝐴ngels and how, before there were VCs in this space, people were called 𝐸-𝐴ngels.
𝐸-𝐴ngels. Wow. All right. So we have 𝐸-health. We had also 𝐸-𝐴ngels. Nice. Good one.
Right. And when you had an 𝐸-𝐴ngel pitch, you had 30 seconds to explain your business model. It was, okay, what's your business model? Go, 30 seconds. Part of why I was so interested, I think, in the .com boom and subsequent bust is because of where I'm from. So I'm from Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And there was a company in D.C. that completely changed the landscape, a company called America Online, which in the U.S. got everyone to use the internet. Started by this gentleman named Steve Case, which I think for the newer audience or the next generation, I call him Mark Zuckerberg before Mark Zuckerberg. So one of the first .com billionaires who today has a VC group called Revolution. And what I think a lot of people miss in his story, it's easy to read the headlines on America Online and to talk about them in business school and to also kind of understand or break down the Time Warner merger. But what a lot of people forget is he had a digital health company back in that I think was founded in as early as 2004 in stealth mode. It was definitely out of stealth by the time I joined in 2006.
Wow. Okay.
And this wasn't really a small potato startup. I mean, even in 2006 dollars, it was a $300 million startup digital health company, and it had an amazing board of directors. Colin Powell, rest in peace. People like Carly Fiorina, who we still hear about from time to time when presidential nominees come up. And I think at the time she was high-ranking at Hewlett-Packard. Ron Klain, I believe, was also on the board. Ron Klain, people know him in the DC circle because he was Al Gore's chief of staff. Today, he was also Joe Biden's chief of staff when Biden was vice president, and he's Biden's chief of staff now as Biden is president. Ron was actually my boss at one point. And to really, I guess, put it into context in terms of the kind of influence the company had back then and the kind of people that were around, Ron actually had a movie made about him, an HBO movie called �၀𝐞𝐝, who was actually, I mean, in hindsight, it's a bit strange, but he was played by Kevin Spacey. But it's a movie that you can find pretty much on Amazon Prime today. So that was really how I got, I think, into digital health many years ago now. Revolution Health was a company that was probably easily 10 to 15 years ahead of its time. And I think I learned a lot of lessons back then in terms of a lot of times in healthcare, it doesn't matter who you have around. And you can have the smartest people in the world working on your product and your program, but if you are not at the right place at the right time, then it doesn't matter. And just to put in the further context, part of what was happening around that time, there were one of the products that we were working on was a personal health record. So we launched a personal health record. Even to this day, in 2022, no one has managed to develop a personal health record, something that's portable, something that people can actually use. Even today, everyone literally has a vaccine passport, well, at least in Europe, or a digital version of their vaccine. None of these systems are interoperable, you know. But around that time, Revolution Health had a product, Google Health had a product,
Yeah.
and even Microsoft had a personal health record called Microsoft Health Vault. None of those
Yeah, I
products
remember
exist
that.
today. Right. So that was really, I think, how my career started. And soon after that experience, so the company was divested to another company called Waterfront Media, I think in 2008 or 2009. And then I was pretty much finding my way. I think I worked in healthcare before. I was going to work in healthcare after. I had a skill set in 2009, at least in the US. We had the US financial crisis happening. So jobs were kind of dried up. And what I did, I mean, I started consulting. I mean, I worked for a big entrepreneur. I had seen how to just start doing work for people. So that's what I did. So I had a, pretty nice business in just a few months. I had a children's hospital as a client where I was doing strategy work. I had a large health and wellness platform that was doing 350 million page views a month, where I was doing partnerships. The name of that company was Spark People. It's called something else today. And then I was working with, I started working with pharmaceutical companies, so supporting their public affairs work in DC. And I was doing that work primarily through a firm called 𝐿𝐼 Health, which was founded by one of the big patient advocates in the US, Donna 𝐿𝐼, who a lot of people know, and her husband, Dennis 𝐿𝐼, who is a former Bristol Myers Squibb executive, also that a lot of people, I think, in the industry know. So that was, kind of my three-legged stool for work. And I think I basically have worked on that three-legged stool throughout my career. So that was my day job. And then at night, I actually bartended at a Capitol Hill bar 3 nights a week. And I only mention that because one night at the bar, as the Affordable Care Act was unfolding, we were talking about Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. And I was telling everyone at the bar how it worked. And everyone, because it was a Capitol Hill bar, they work for some congressperson. And they're like, Dominick, I work in the healthcare committee. I don't even know this. How do you know this? And I started telling people, the experience. And they were like, and this one guy came up to me, he was like, Dom, you got to check out this fellowship program. You'll get to go to Germany and you'll be there for a year and they'll teach you the language and everything is paid for. You get a tax-free stipend. It'll be great. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. Sign me up. Of course, I really got the application in on time. But I went through the process and I was actually in Germany for the first time, June 2010.
Okay.
And life-changing experience. I'd never traveled so much during that year. I was exposed to so much. I learned German at a really high level. I don't think my German now is even at the level that it was back then. I was introduced to Bayer. I was supporting global advocacy for about 3 or 4 months for one of the ophthalmology projects. I had the opportunity to work at the federal level in Germany for the sick fund structure that they have. So saw firsthand what was coming online around that time with the health technology assessment. Like Germany was the first country to do it, right? Which I think is such a great precedent to look at when we talk about the DiGA, the Digital Reimbursement Act in Germany.
Yes, I heard. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's interesting. I've been around long enough and I've seen things happen long enough to where I can take stock of things pretty quickly and at least anticipate where the ball is going or where it should be going and what pitfalls I think we have to watch out for. To make a long story shorter, after that fellowship, I went back to the US, started consulting again, but started a formal career with Bayer in 2013. My old manager gave me a call, and it was probably very early that in 2013 and said, hey, do you want to come to Bayer? I had no idea what the job was. I had no idea where I would be working. I just said yes. And officially started working with the Animal Health Group in 2013, supported global communications for the companion animal portfolio, which all that really means is that 5 to 10% of my job was probably looking at dog and cat videos on social media.
Interesting. So you were like on the hype, like So I
Yeah,
think you must have had quite a lot of cat videos to look at least,
I knew
since the
who
cat
all the
videos
cat
are.
celebrities. You know, I almost shed a tear when Grumpy Cat died. That's how deep I went
Wow,
into
wow.
it. Um, but yeah, I did I was part of the health policy team for a while, and yeah, now
Okay.
I'm heading up our G4A group,
Yeah, I
which I
mean,
think a lot of people in the space know.
yeah, I mean, like Dominic, I this is not the first time I heard about G4A.
Mhm.
I've traveled for a couple of digital health conferences, and G4A, they were like upfront. I remember Jesus, I remember Eugene, I can remember all these great people. And the fact that you are there as well now and you're leading these efforts, there must be something like really special. And I'd like to learn more about what's up with the Bayer G4A, how it's going, what's the direction, like how do you keep on attracting healthcare startups? Like how have you moved forward? How it has evolved? Like all these really interesting questions, because I've seen a lot of good work coming out from there.
Yeah.
And I really think that any pharmaceutical company could definitely learn, and if not pharmaceutical, even a medtech, even a medical device company can learn from your approach. So tell us, how do you make it work? How
Yeah.
um
Thank you for that feedback, and I really appreciate it. And you're right. So G4A, I'm so humble, so thankful for the work that Jesus and Eugene did, that they did before me, and even Sue,
yeah.
Susanna Margot,
Mhm. Yes, I know.
because G4A is bigger than me. It's
Yeah.
bigger than any one person, I think, that works for G4A. Uh, because what really happened, it was such the right thing at the right time for Bayer and for the ecosystem when it started. And this is what you really have to like. Jesus, he's really great at being a fire starter, And
Okay.
he started the fire actually 10 years ago, and he did it based on what he saw. So Berlin, I'm in Berlin, and around that time, rents were super cheap. They're a lot higher now. But every startup in Europe wanted to be in Berlin. Cheap rent,
Yeah.
cheap beer, lots of parties, and financing, potentially through family offices. So you could legitimately go out to a party, meet some guy that knew a guy or that had an idea, and you could either have a company or have your next round or have an early seed investor. And that's a little bit of what was happening. And so Jesus saw this going on and went to an executive at Bayer, Reinhard Franzen. At the time, he was the president of the European organization, and
Okay.
said, Reinhard, let's do something. And they had a handshake deal to form G4A. And we really started as a company that we were called Grants for Apps. We just go by G4A now because we
Hmm.
actually gave out grants to employees to develop apps, like 5,000
Hmm.
euros, 10,000 euros. And then it was that fire element came in when Jesus took that from inside of Bears. So we have a campus in Berlin with 5,000 employees, and just
Wow.
started
Okay.
doing meetups all around Germany. And this is actually where I met Jesus, I think in 2013 or early
Hmm.
2014 at a meetup
Oh.
in Cologne. And I'm like, oh, you're working on healthcare startups? Like, I love healthcare startups. So he got me involved pretty early,
All right.
because they just wanted employees to get involved. And so I was one of the reviewers back in, the
Hmm.
early days in 2014, 2013. Um, and it was a lot of fun and completely infectious. And then, when Eugene came in, I mean, I think Jesus also had a little bit the founder's dilemma. Like, you see something, you do something, you get it to a certain place, and then you have to
Hmm.
have someone kind of elevate it. And with Eugene, he took it to another level. And around the time when Eugene came on board, and between, I guess, that time, a lot of structure was put in place.
Okay.
So Eugene really started the Deal Maker program. A lot of the structure that was put in place was also based on feedback that we got from Bayer colleagues who, like, once we started working with companies directly, we got some feedback that maybe they're a little bit too early. We should work with later stage companies. And so that's when we kind of introduced this early ecosystem model, what we call our growth track, and a later stage co-commercialization, co-development, partnership model, our advanced track. And that happened under Eugene's watch. And I think that brought in a lot of attention because around that time, I mean, the tickets had grown to about 50,000 to 75,000 euro in our convertible note. And then a lot of larger digital health companies started knocking on our door. So, I mean, I even remember in 2019, 2018, the years are blurry, but Eugene, he brought 𝐿𝐿-𝐴 to our signing day program, pre-IPO,
Wow.
which was awesome to hear firsthand about Livongo when they were still, kind of before they showed themselves to the public market. And so that's the kind of credibility that the program had built by then. And so I think for me to follow in the wake of that, again, I'm hugely humbled, and it's such a great opportunity for me personally. And really, to me, it's about connecting to something that's larger, because where healthcare is going, what we've seen in the last 2 years, and I think I'm really quite fortunate to have, I hate to say it, but to come on board when healthcare is such a focus for everyone on the planet right now. I like to have jokingly say that everyone on the planet is a novice virologist to a degree. But that actually, I think, shapes where we're going. And we've seen, I think, the last 2 years of funding, so 2021 funding, 2020 venture funding, I mean, to be 100% year over year, for 2 consecutive years is unheard of. And I think that says a lot about the attention that this sector has right now. And we're in a perfect place to capitalize on it. Last thing I will maybe say about the evolution, because I think you asked like 3 or 4 questions, so I'm trying to at least connect.
It's all right, no worries.
Some of them. But actually, Research to Guidance, the consultants, they actually did a white paper
Yes.
that was published in March, I want to say, about the partnership and accelerator models that companies or MedTech or pharma corporates are doing in this space. And they actually mentioned G4A. And I think what's fascinating is they show all the complete building blocks. Like I was looking at their white paper and I'm like, wow, like did we talk to them and show them some slides on our history? I'm not too sure, but they actually outlined very well the challenges that Jesus went through, the challenges that Eugene went through, and the challenges I think that we're going through right now. So we do have challenges, things aren't perfect, but where we see the opportunities right now, we essentially have an integrated care strategy. So integrated care at Bayer means that we are looking at digital health platforms that do not involve our traditional pill business. So we're drug agnostic. We are playing in our swim lanes. We're in cardiometabolic diseases and CKD. We are in women's health. We potentially will be in oncology. And we have kind of a thread throughout that, an integrator thread with mental health. And I think part of what you've seen from G4A publicly in the last 1 or 2 months, we were actually mentioned in the 𝐿𝐴 announcement. So our corporate venture capital arm, 𝐿𝐴-𝐲, they made a $9.5 million investment in 𝐿𝐴. And what has never happened in G4A history, so we signed a letter of intent, through G4A. We announced them through our advanced track, I think in September. So we had a letter of intent signed by about that time. And to have an announcement on, $9.5 million in 𝐿𝐴, that time, for that to happen in publicly in less than 6 months or in about 6 months, and behind closed doors for it to happen much faster, I think is remarkable. And that's a new standard, I think, for G4A. And that's something that we always wanted to do that hasn't quite happened in that way.
Wow. I mean, like, it kind of reminds me of a startup within a big company, so to say. So I have this feeling of intrapreneurship happening within Bayer. And it hasn't been just the past 2 years, but it's been going for some time now. Now we're talking about a good 8 years. So there are so many things you can do in 8 years. And even like you mentioned, Jesus, Eugene, Zoo, it's, I mean, wow. And what's really interesting that wherever I've been traveling to, especially to digital health conferences, I always knew who is the guy who is the gal, so to say, taking care of the digital health stuff at Bayer. So I definitely couldn't remember all the other contact points from the other pharmaceutical companies. But for Bayer, I could really and truly identify who the expert is. And I think that's also part of the visionary stuff that has happened. Maybe I've heard of, for example, Almiral, and I'm trying to think of other companies that come, but like Bayer really kind of struck me, So like but this is more of a more bigger picture thinking here now, Dominic. Like, how do you see the future of digital health and medtech? Now we've gone through a pandemic that we keep on waving through, so to say, with different kinds, with different variants. But at the same time, we're getting better and better at managing it, and also better at dealing with scale. Whereas before we might have had challenges with scale, especially the scale of the pandemic. Now we're able to deal with it, and we're even seeing the digital transformation of public health fitting in. So my question is, how do you see the future of digital health and medtech, and how do you see Bayer fitting into the picture? How does a traditional pharma company, like a big pharma company, so to say, I hate using big pharma because then all the misinformation sentiment comes into the picture, but how does a pharmaceutical company, an established one, fit into the picture and continuously innovate itself? All yours.
Well, first, I don't think we're big pharma at all. If you really look at revenue, we're probably like mid-sized player, or top 20, but we're not that big. I think in the pharmaceutical space, people don't consider us big. But I think the first thing about where it's going, for me, one of the first conversations that we have to have that I think very few people are talking about, the risk.
The risk, okay.
The risk that we have in the marketplace and in the ecosystem right now. And I think there's more risk than we care to think about. So first risk point is new investors. So part of what drove that 100% year-over-year growth in 2 consecutive years in venture spending was the fact that so many new participants are in that market. Those range from A-list celebrities, A-list athletes. Like people like Oprah, like people that go by one name, Oprah.
Yeah, Oprah. Yeah, exactly.
Or athletes that go by one name, Serena. So these people, you have people like that are in the space. You have new VCs that are in the space. A lot of funds that traditionally have not worked in healthcare have started adding or building healthcare portfolio, whether they're private equity or whether they have a traditional VC. And I think those investors that are used to working with different kinds of technologies, highly scalable technologies that are normally not connected to high touch industries like healthcare, I think they will expect a return on investment that the ecosystem and the marketplace are not ready to provide. That's the first risk point. The second risk point is absolutely in the public market. So we've seen a number of SPACs, we've seen a number of IPOs. When you look at the SEC filings, which are publicly available, a lot of those top lines are not healthy. A lot of those user numbers are not healthy. A lot of that engagement is not healthy. And so, we have to think, are these companies unicorns, or are they jackass companies or donkeys? Like, what are they going to be? And because of what we're seeing in the public market, especially because the US public market has cooled off in the last quarter, valuations have changed tremendously. So right now, what we've seen, I think before this cooling off period, by the end of last year, companies with barely an MVP in this space, they were asking for like 1 to 3 million euros.
Wow, without an MVP?
Right.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
Like
Maybe I should
almost
try.
within and it's like,
Wow.
but these are the kinds of things that we're seeing or that we saw
Okay.
technically by end of last year. And this is how hot the sector was.
All
And I
right.
think things, there's some data out now that says that things are starting to cool down. But
Okay.
I think those are some of the risk elements. Another risk element that very few people are talking about that you heard me talk about in Malta end of
Mm-hmm.
last year is the Artificial Intelligence Act. And so it's
Yeah.
not just the Artificial Intelligence Act, it really is data flows in Europe. So for the Europe
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem in particular, there are so many localization policies. I read about one maybe a month ago in Austria that basically says that companies cannot use Google Analytics and they can't use like Google ad tracking. Which to me, if something like this were to spread through the rest of the EU, it means that anyone with even a small website that can't
He
rely
has
on
to kind of
Google,
rethink everything. Okay.
exactly, he would just have to move across the border and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then that's like kind of at the micro level, but then you have the macro level because at the macro level, we saw Facebook for the first time ever lose users. That was the headline, right? And we saw their share price was affected substantially. But the part B level to that was the fact that they said we may pull out of Europe. And so it's easy to think about Facebook Meta as kind of this blue platform where, I mean, these days your mom is there and everyone you went to high school with is there, but really it means
The,
everyone on your WhatsApp, everyone in your Instagram, all of that gone overnight. Already my Instagram doesn't work the way that, my friends and colleagues in the States, the way their Instagram works. And so because the data privacy shield was struck down last year, very quietly, two healthcare players, um, to me, that is a huge risk. I think that's going to have a huge potential impact in the marketplace. The one piece of hope, I think that there are a number of conversations that are talking about, okay, how to replicate this digital therapeutic reimbursement in other countries. Part of the conversation that I'm having with high level, quite strategic actors in the space is, well, we should just take this to the EU level, right? Because this is how, again, remember, the health technology assessment started. So Germany had it. They said, well, hey, if
mm-hmm.
you want a new drug, you have to prove these things and you have to bring this research and then we'll
Okay.
approve it. And then France said, oh, we want to do that too. And then like
Okay.
3 to 5 years later, it was an EU level
Hmm.
initiative run by the EU Medicines Agency. And so we've seen Germany has it, Belgium has a system, and then Macron last quarter in end of 2021 or Q4, early Q4 2021 said, hey, we want that thing that Germany has for digital. So
Yeah,
now it's,
we're talking about the DIGA Act. Is that
yeah,
correct now?
right,
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
yeah,
I agree with you. 100%.
exactly. That's a hope. But if we can't figure out the data aspect in Europe, I
Hmm.
think it's going to, this is something I think that not enough people are talking about. I actually spoke with one of our portfolio, actually Humana Medical.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think they're a great example. They have a partnership with University of Munich. They still do some research with Bayer. And, I think they had some substantial issues based around data localization to support that project. And so this isn't
Okay.
just an amount of medical issue. This is an issue across the ecosystem. It makes
Yeah.
it very difficult to do business across borders and borders that are not that far away, that are like
Yeah.
1 hour plane ride.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of putting my hopes on the European health data space. I'm putting my hopes on the visions that are behind that. So maybe the way it looks right now, it's still kind of evolving. And it's still kind of, but I'm really putting my hopes on that because I know that, and this I've really seen in the pandemic itself, that if there is legislation and direction in place and policy, then really and truly the rest follows on naturally, because people will say, all right, I don't want to break the law, or, oh, I don't want to go against the flow. Oh, I want to do this and that. And those who were not complying with the law or were not complying with the guidance that was issued, and say, all right, I have to do something about it. And things start getting moving. So I do have a lot of hope in what's happening there, even with the here, I believe, like the health emergency response team, because of the work that will happen there, then health data will have to move faster. And then what happens is that if you improve one kind of movement of health data, the infrastructure will be in place and the rest will follow. So there's I think a really good vision there in place. And I really hope that we will really take it to the end there as a European community. And, it's really great to have people like you who, are not European originally, but who bring this outside perspective to the whole vision. Like I had, for example, I actually missed out this issue about the Google ads and the Google Analytics. I actually didn't know about this. So you taught me something new today with a simple podcast. And I'm sure that there will be other people who will say, oh, why is this happening? And trying to look and even preparing, even from a digital health point of view. So we're moving pretty quickly, Dominic, and this conversation was so insightful with a lot of golden nuggets, I have to say. So I would definitely tell our viewers to really and truly pay attention to each and every word you said. But I have one last question to you.
Sure.
And this is with MedTech Word, of course. Do you have now MedTech Word, especially the Malta version? Now we also had Dubai. We had a bit of a contribution there as well. So, but yeah, I will tell Dylan about that. I will tell Dylan. And my big question is to you is what were your key takeaways from MedTech? Where did you enjoy it? Are you looking forward to this year's version? I mean, we have a couple of also events coming up. What are your thoughts about it? Maybe some feedback as well.
I was surprised at the quality and really the traction and already some of the scale of the companies that I saw. So especially, I think the winner. So the pitch session that you had really stands out in my mind.
Yeah.
One of the pitch sessions, because the winner was a world-class company. I mean, I think if G4A was in that particular category, I would have definitely wanted us to work with that company. And it wasn't even. I'm pretty sure the judges for that particular pitch session had a very difficult time, because there are definitely three. I mean, all of the entrepreneurs were great. There were even some companies from Germany in that pitch session.
Yeah, I do.
But there
autonomy, if I remember.
There are 3 or 4 entrepreneurs in that session that were completely world-class. And I think Malta as a community has so much working for it right now. The fact that it is actually quite close, I think to continental Europe. I think the fact that healthcare is looked at in a really consistent way, and also in a way that's pushing the boundary, I think, in some areas. And then I think the fact that, part of how I really convinced my management that I could even go to Malta, because Malta in November, they're like, Dominic, what is this? Is this a holiday? I'm like, no, this is really serious. And part of how I was able to convince them is the fact that it was the one space. I've been to a lot of conferences in the past couple years with G4A, but it was the one space where you had the policy people, where you had the startups, where you had MedTech players, where you had also physicians were there, physician entrepreneurs. There were people there from California, literally people from all over the world were there in a very intimate space and very accessible space. And it was also, I think, one of the few conferences, of course, that I went to in 2021. So that feeling of community was definitely there, and the quality was there. And the fact that it attracted so much talent from all around the world, I was hugely surprised. And what really pushed people over the edge, is the fact that you had people in the Malta legislature that were working on artificial intelligence. So to me, I saw that as a great opportunity to talk about the Artificial Intelligence Act. And to your point around compliance, the fact that compliance for early companies mean that they may have to separate with 40% of their net income,
yeah,
to meet the compliance standards. I mean, I think that was the perfect place to, follow Jesus and light a fuse, to start a fire. So I took a lot away from it. I'm really looking forward to this year, 2022. I think that, Sigma World put on a great event. It was great stuff.
Amazing, and I'm going to change tack a bit here. So Dominick, you have 1 minute now to raise awareness on any topic of your choice. It doesn't have to be digital health or healthcare. It could be any topic of your choice that you would really like to raise awareness on. It could be a particular charity, or it could be a particular, so something that you would like to raise awareness. You've got 1 minute, all yours.
The thing I want to raise awareness on the most, I actually spoke about this on a podcast with 𝐉𝐸ₐ maybe a month ago. And I think that because Western Europe has an aging population that we all know about, the one thing I've noticed the most, even in a wealthy country like Germany, is that Europe has not prepared for this population from an infrastructure point of view. So actually today I was on the train, there was an old guy with a cane, he could barely walk. He had to lean up on a pillar just to support himself. When the train came, I almost had to help him to get on the train. He was only traveling one stop because he could not walk to his destination. He had to step up to walk into the train, which in many other systems, you don't have to do this. In Germany, if you have a wheelchair, the train literally has to stop. You have to go to the very front of the train in your wheelchair. Not all of the train stations actually have elevators. I have no idea how these wheelchair people actually get to the train platform. They didn't have to flip out a ramp so you can wheel yourself in. It stops the whole train and the whole train service. And then you tell the conductor your destination, and then they have to let you out. This doesn't happen in other places around the world. So infrastructure, physical infrastructure to support the aging population in Europe is the one thing I think we need to think about. I know it's not a digital solution. I know it's something else, but I think that's such a need right now in Europe.
Wow, I didn't expect that, and it was so deep. I think your voice helps too, Dominick, as well, to bring out the deep insight here. And with that in mind, Dominick, I would love to thank you for being here with us. And I know they had like a really packed schedule. And thank you for joining us. And just to do a quick shout out to our viewers, you can follow us on all our social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and also Twitter. And you can also follow Digital Health Malta. So you can follow us on MedTech World and Digital Health Malta to learn more about these podcasts. And I really and truly can't wait now to see you on the next podcast. Cheers, Dominick. Thank you for everything.
Thanks, Stefan. Take care.